The starfield shimmered through the cockpit window of the sleek black shuttle as Anakin Skywalker, no, Darth Vader now, stared into the vastness of space. His eyes burned, not from exhaustion, but from the fire within him, the fire that had ignited the moment he had made his choice. His choice. He was no longer the Jedi's puppet, no longer bound by their hypocrisy and weakness. He had transcended that. He was something greater now. The shuttle hummed as it hurtled toward Mustafar, the lava-scorched planet that seethed below like his own emotions, turbulent and deadly. He clenched the armrests of his seat, feeling the heat of his anger rise again, suffocating him in its intensity. The betrayal of the Jedi, his former brothers and mentors, was still raw. They had held him back, lied to him. But he had seen through their lies now, and Palpatine, his new master, had shown him the truth. The Jedi were the true enemies of peace, and he had taken the first step in eradicating their treachery. Padmé. Her name echoed in his mind, a beacon of light in the storm of darkness that surrounded him. He did this for her. He had made this sacrifice for her. Every step, every betrayal of his old life was justified. It was all to save her, to bring peace to the galaxy. With the power of the dark side, he would protect her from death itself. No one could take her away from him, not even the Force. Yet beneath his righteous fury, something twisted and cold festered. A growing paranoia gnawed at him, a fear that she would never understand why he had done this, that she might turn against him like the others. He shook his head violently, dismissing the thought. She would understand. She had to. Once the galaxy was his to shape, once the war was over and the traitors crushed, they could be together, and everything would be as it should. The Separatists, they were the final piece. Palpatine had told him to end the war, to eliminate the leaders of the rebellion who cowered on Mustafar. It was fitting, Vader thought bitterly, that their end would come on a world as merciless and destructive as the one he was now flying toward. They, too, were pawns in a game they never understood, but their usefulness had ended. Now, like the Jedi, they would be swept aside. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere of Mustafar, the fiery rivers of molten rock illuminated the landscape below. Vader's gaze hardened. His hands trembled with anticipation as they hovered near his lightsaber, the weapon that would deliver the galaxy from chaos and establish the order he would build, an order where he would rule, where Padmé would be safe, and where there would be no more weakness. The darkness around him deepened, and as the shuttle's ramp lowered onto the burning surface of the planet, Darth Vader stepped into his new world. There would be no mercy for those who stood in his way. Not anymore. The molten rivers of Mustafar churned beneath the jagged cliffs as the two former friends stood across from each other, the weight of their history pressing down on the barren landscape. Anakin's eyes, once filled with hope and compassion, were now dark, burning with a hatred that consumed him. He stood rigid, his newly ignited lightsaber casting an eerie red glow that flickered against the fiery backdrop. The man standing before him was no longer his brother, no longer his mentor. He was an enemy, just like the rest.
Anakin...
Obi-Wan's voice was heavy with sorrow. He took a cautious step forward, his own blue lightsaber igniting with a hum, a sharp contrast to the hellish world surrounding them.
The Chancellor has twisted your mind. You've become the very thing we swore to destroy.
The words felt like venom to Anakin's ears. Twisted? He clenched his jaw, every muscle in his body tight with rage. How dare Obi-Wan speak to him like this, after everything Anakin had sacrificed, after everything he had done for Padmé, for the galaxy?
Don't lecture me, Obi-Wan.
He spat, his voice low and dangerous.
I see through the lies of the Jedi. I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire.
Your new empire?
Obi-Wan's brow furrowed in disbelief, but beneath his calm exterior, there was a deep well of grief.
Anakin, Padmé can't be a part of this. You've let the dark side take everything from you. Don't let it take her too.
At the mention of Padmé's name, something inside Anakin snapped. His grip on the lightsaber tightened, his knuckles turning white. Padmé. Obi-Wan dared to speak of her as though he knew her heart, as though he had any right to be part of their lives. An ugly thought rose to the surface of Anakin's mind. What if Obi-Wan had come here not to stop him, but to take her away? Was he jealous? Was that it?
You brought her here, didn't you?
Anakin's voice was venomous, his eyes narrowing as suspicion took root.
You're trying to turn her against me, just like the Council. You never trusted me. You never believed in me. You wanted her for yourself, all along.
Anakin, that's not true.
Obi-Wan began, but Anakin's fury was uncontainable now, a tidal wave crashing down, obliterating reason and compassion.
Liar!
Anakin roared, surging forward, his lightsaber arcing through the air with lethal intent. Obi-Wan blocked the strike, the force of the blow sending a shockwave through both their bodies. Sparks flew as their sabers clashed, the bright light cutting through the ash-filled sky. Anakin pressed his attack, each strike more brutal than the last.
You will not take her from me!
He snarled, slashing furiously at Obi-Wan, driven by an all-consuming desire to prove himself, to prove that he was stronger, that he had surpassed everything Obi-Wan ever was. His movements were erratic, fueled by rage and pain, but Obi-Wan, ever the master of defense, held his ground, deflecting each blow with precision.
Anakin, stop.
Obi-Wan pleaded between strikes, desperation in his voice.
You're throwing away everything. Padmé doesn't want this. She loves you, but not like this.
But Anakin couldn't hear him anymore. He was too far gone. To him, this was not just a duel. It was the culmination of everything. Proving his power, proving his righteousness, and Obi-Wan standing in his way was just another obstacle.
You underestimate my power?
Anakin shouted, his voice trembling with fury and frustration. The lava surged below them as the battle raged on. Both men pushed to their limits, but Anakin's mind was set. There was no going back. Not now. Not ever. However, unlike the story we know and love, Obi-Wan will fall from the hands of Anakin while confront his Padawan on Mustafar. With the death of Obi-Wan, how will the galaxy stop the threat that is Vader? Stay tuned to this episode of What If? Before we continue, I want to tell you about this episode's sponsor, Fantasy Sabers. Let me tell you, it is a dream for me to own my own lightsabers. Fantasy Saber makes quality lightsaber with customizable parts that really make me feel like a Jedi, or Sith if I feel a bit naughty that day. But nonetheless, they are one of the best sabers you can find in the market out there. If you're into cosplaying, they have high quality replicas, and if you just want to mess around with your buddies, they also have their own takes in lightsabers they come up with themselves. Go check them out in the link in the description to get your own saber and live out your fantasy of being in Star Wars right now. Now, back to the story. The air crackled with the heat of molten lava, and the once rhythmic hum of clashing lightsabers had grown desperate, erratic. Sweat poured down Anakin's face, his breath heavy and ragged, but his eyes blazed with furious determination. He had driven Obi-Wan back to the edge of the cliff, the red and orange glow of the lava below, casting the two combatants in an infernal light.
You were the chosen one!
Obi-Wan shouted, his voice strained, filled with both anger and sorrow.
You were meant to destroy the Sith, not join them, bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness.
Anakin's face twisted into a snarl, his grip on his lightsaber tightening. Those words were meaningless to him now, the prophecy, the Jedi Code, all of it. They had only ever held him back, kept him weak. He was stronger than they had ever allowed him to be. He was free.
I am more powerful than you could ever imagine. You failed me, Obi-Wan. You never believed in me. You're no better than the rest of them.
With a sudden surge of strength, Anakin pushed forward, driving his lightsaber into Obi-Wan's guard, forcing him to stumble backward. The edge of the cliff crumbled beneath Obi-Wan's feet, and for the briefest moment, Anakin saw the conflict in his old friend's eyes, regret, pain, love, all at once. But it was too late. In a final vicious strike, Anakin slashed down with his lightsaber, severing Obi-Wan's arm and sending him tumbling toward the fiery rivers below. The scream of pain was swallowed by the roar of the planet itself as Obi-Wan's body disappeared into the molten lava, consumed in an instant. Anakin stood at the edge, chest heaving, his lightsaber still humming in his grip. He stared down at the spot where Obi-Wan had fallen, waiting to feel the rush of triumph that should come from his victory. He had done it. He had finally proven that he was stronger, that no one, not even Obi-Wan, could stand in his way. But as the moments passed, the expected satisfaction never came. Instead, there was a strange hollowness, a void where his triumph should have been. He had killed his former master, his brother, but it didn't feel like a victory. The rage that had fueled him moments ago began to flicker, replaced by something colder, darker. For a brief second, doubt crept into his mind. Had this been the right path? Obi-Wan's words haunted him, about Padmé, about the darkness he had embraced. Anakin shook his head, trying to dispel the unease. No, he had done what was necessary. He was saving Padmé. He was bringing peace to the galaxy. That was all that mattered, but the doubt remained, a shadow that lurked beneath the surface of his thoughts. What had he become? His breath came in heavy labored bursts, the sound of his own exhale through the mask amplifying the emptiness inside him. The act of killing Obi-Wan, of severing the last connection to his old life, had cemented his fall. There was no turning back now. Darth Vader was all that was left. Yet as he stood alone on the scorched surface of Mustafar, surrounded by fire and death, he couldn't help but feel a deep, gnawing sense of loss, as if something vital had died along with Obi-Wan. Victory had never felt so hollow. The doors of Padmé's apartment slid open, and Anakin, now fully Darth Vader, stepped inside, his dark cloak trailing behind him like the shadow he had become. The moment he saw her, standing near the wide balcony with the Coruscant skyline glittering behind her, something softened in him. Padmé was the one light left in his life, the only anchor that kept him from spiraling completely into the abyss of the dark side.
Anakin!
Her voice was soft, but full of emotion as she rushed toward him. She had been crying. He could see the streaks of tears on her face, the fear in her eyes.
What's happened? The Jedi Temple? There are rumors, terrible rumors. Please tell me they're not true.
Anakin's jaw tightened. The temple, the slaughter, his former comrades, the younglings. He forced the memories away, the guilt rising like bile in his throat. He had done what was necessary. He had no choice. It was for Padmé. It was all for her.
I did what I had to do,
Anakin said, his voice low, trying to sound resolute. He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling as they brushed against hers. The Jedi were planning to overthrow the Republic. They were traitors. I stopped them. I stopped them for us, Padmé, to protect you, to save you. Padmé recoiled, her eyes widening in disbelief.
Save me? Anakin, what have you done? You're scaring me!
He stepped closer, desperate now, his breath heavy.
Don't you see? I did this for you. For us. With the power of the dark side, I can keep you safe. I can protect you from death. We can rule together, Padmé. We can bring peace to the galaxy.
But the words felt hollow, even to him. He could hear the cracks in his voice, the desperation creeping in. Padmé's expression changed, not just with fear, but something worse. Disgust, horror. It was a look that pierced through his armor more painfully than any lightsaber ever could.
You're not the man I loved,
she whispered, stepping back from him, shaking her head.
You're not the Anakin I married.
For a brief moment, the room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging between them like a blade. Anakin's heart twisted, something inside him breaking. No, this wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had done everything for her, for this future. How could she not understand?
I am still Anakin.
He insisted, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself anymore.
I'm doing this to protect you, Padmé. Don't you see? Together, we can end the chaos. We can bring order to the galaxy.
Padmé's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of sadness, not fear.
At what cost? You've destroyed everything. The Republic, the Jedi, Anakin. What have you become?
His anger flared, but it was a brittle, fragile anger fueled more by fear and doubt than real fury.
It was the only way,
he shouted, his voice cracking. The power he had gained from the dark side coursed through him, but instead of control, it felt chaotic, wild. The teachings of the Emperor echoed in his mind, promising unlimited power, but now all he felt was isolation. The cruelty of the Empire had already begun to manifest. He had seen it in the hollowed eyes of soldiers, the suppression of dissent, the fear spreading across the galaxy. Was this the peace he had fought for? Doubt gnawed at him, but he buried it deep. He couldn't turn back now, not after everything. Padmé's words came like a whisper.
Anakin, if you continue down this path, you will lose me.
Her voice, full of sorrow, shattered what little resolve he had left. He stood there, trembling, torn between the darkness he had embraced and the life he had wanted to save, but there was no going back. He had gone too far.
Then so be it,
Anakin whispered, his voice hollow, the weight of his choices crushing him as he turned away from her. As he left, the darkness around him grew heavier, suffocating. Anakin Skywalker was gone. Only Darth Vader remained. The dark halls of the Imperial command ship were suffocating in their silence, save for the rhythmic sound of Darth Vader's breathing. Each mechanical hiss was a constant reminder of the life he had chosen, the life he could not escape. His thoughts, once sharp and clear in their purpose, were now clouded with a growing sense of dread. Padmé was gone. She had vanished without a trace, slipping away with the help of what remained of the Jedi, those traitors who still clung to their doomed rebellion. His mind replayed the last moment he had seen her, the heartbreak in her eyes, the disgust in her voice as she had recoiled from him. It was supposed to have been different. He had envisioned them ruling the galaxy together, her by his side as he forged a new order. But she had rejected him. Standing in the center of the command deck, Darth Vader's presence filled the space with a dark energy, his towering figure casting long shadows across the room. Several officers stood rigid at their stations, too terrified to look in his direction. Word of Padmé's disappearance had spread quickly through the Empire, though no one dared to speak of it directly. Even the Emperor had remained silent on the matter, watching from the shadows as his apprentice grappled with his new reality. Vader clenched his fist, his breathing growing more labored. Where was she? A part of him wanted to unleash the full might of the Empire, to turn every planet upside down until she was found. He had the power. He could mobilize fleets, stormtroopers, entire armies if necessary. No one could hide from him, not for long. And yet he hesitated. The truth gnawed at him, festering deep within his soul. He could command armies, raise planets, and crush all opposition, but none of it would bring her back to him. She had left because of him. She had fled because of what he had become. The dark side, with all its promises of power and control, had failed to give him what he truly craved, her love, her trust. Instead, it had driven her away. As the moments passed, a cold realization set in. He could never have both. The dark side demanded everything, and in return it gave him power. But it had no room for love, no space for belonging. The anger, the fear, it fueled him, but it left him hollow, each victory tasting more like ash. Vader's mind flickered with images of Padmé, her laughter, her touch, the way she had looked at him before everything fell apart. He felt a deep, desperate longing, but he was trapped now, caged by the choices he had made. His commitment to the dark side was total. There was no turning back. The Emperor's words echoed in his mind, dark and insidious.
Love is weakness, Lord Vader. It is a chain that binds you to your past.
But even as he stood there, the imposing figure of Darth Vader, he could not banish the thought of her. What had he done? One of the officers dared to approach, fear etched across his face.
Lord Vader, shall we proceed with the search for Senator Amidala?
Vader turned his head slowly, the words freezing him in place. For a moment, the temptation to say yes, to command the galaxy to kneel at his feet until Padmé was brought back to him, was overwhelming. But he knew deep down that it was too late. She would never be his again.
No!
Vader said, his voice low and menacing, the finality of the word cutting through the air like a blade.
Leave her.
The officer bowed quickly and scurried away, and Vader remained alone on the deck, surrounded by darkness. His power had grown beyond anything he could have imagined, yet he had never felt so utterly powerless. The dark side had given him everything, and in doing so, it had taken everything from him. The hiss of Vader's respirator filled the darkened chamber as he stood motionless before the massive viewport, gazing out at the endless void of space. Stars drifted silently beyond the glass, indifferent to the war, death, and suffering that now consumed the galaxy. Darth Vader, the Emperor's relentless enforcer, had become a symbol of fear and death, a weapon honed to hunt the last of the Jedi. Anakin Skywalker was truly gone now, buried beneath layers of armor, scars, and the suffocating weight of the dark side. Any shred of the man he once was had been burned away on Mustafar, along with his hopes, his dreams, and the last traces of love he had clung to. The hunt for the remaining Jedi had become his singular focus. Each day, more and more of them fell by his hand. Vader had become their nightmare, stalking them through the galaxy, showing no mercy. The Emperor had been right. Love was a weakness. Every time Vader crushed a Jedi beneath his boot, every time he ignited his crimson blade, he felt the cold satisfaction of his power. And yet, beneath that satisfaction, something still lingered, an emptiness that power could never fill. It was during one of these hunts on a desolate world far from the core that Vader received the news that would shake him to his core. Padmé had given birth to twins. The information had been extracted from a captured rebel sympathizer, a midwife who had been involved in the secret birthing. She had been careful, trying to keep the details vague, but under the force of Vader's interrogation, the truth had spilled out. Padmé had died, but not before giving birth to two children, his children. For the briefest moment, the world seemed to stop. Vader had known about the pregnancy, of course. He had fought for it, killed for it, believing he could save her. But this was different. They had lived. His children were out there, hidden from him, stolen from him. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in, as Vader's gloved hands clenched into fists. His rage surged to the surface like a storm, crashing through him. They had taken everything from him. The Jedi, the Republic, even Padmé. And now his children were being kept from him, kept from their rightful place at his side. The Emperor had told him nothing of this. Why? Why had he been kept in the dark? But as quickly as the rage had come, it cooled, turning into something else, something colder. A deep, festering pain buried beneath his armor. He couldn't let it consume him. Not now. He had given himself fully to the dark side, and the dark side demanded control, not weakness. He would not lose them like he had lost Padmé. Vader's breath echoed in the silence of the chamber. His gaze shifted back to the stars, but now they seemed more distant than ever. His children, they were out there. He turned, his cloak billowing behind him as he strode toward the door. The hunt for the Jedi would continue, but now his mission had a new focus. He would find his children. They would not be kept from him, not by the Jedi, not by the Emperor, by no one. He would do whatever it took, even if it meant burning the entire galaxy to the ground. Darth Vader, the cold, ruthless enforcer of the Empire, was all that remained. But somewhere deep inside, the faintest ember of Anakin Skywalker still flickered, not yet extinguished, fueled by a love that even the dark side could not fully destroy. The Death Star loomed in the distance, an emblem of the Empire's tyranny and the weight of Darth Vader's sins. Inside, the clash of lightsabers echoed as Luke Skywalker faced the Dark Lord. Blue and red blades danced in the shadows, the hum of the Force pulsating between father and son. Vader fought with precision, his movements calculated, but there was something different now. As he blocked and parried Luke's strikes, the familiar pull of darkness tugged at him, urging him to crush his son's spirit, to drag him into the same abyss that had consumed Anakin Skywalker all those years ago. But something had changed within Vader. The dark side, once his master, now felt hollow. Luke fought with conviction, not hate, and it unsettled Vader in a way he hadn't anticipated. The boy still believed there was good in him. That belief shook the core of Darth Vader, the machine, the monster. Could he still be redeemed? As their lightsabers locked, Luke's face twisted in determination, yet his eyes pleaded with his father.
I will not fight you, Father. I sense the conflict within you.
The word struck deep. Conflict. Vader had felt it growing for months now. The doubt, the questioning of his path. His children had awakened something within him, something long buried beneath layers of pain and anger. Luke's compassion gnawed at his very soul. With a surge of power, Luke disarmed Vader, his lightsaber flying from his grip. Vader fell to his knees, looking up at his son, expecting the killing blow, but Luke did not strike. He stepped back, turning off his weapon.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me,
Luke declared, his voice steady, and in that moment, everything became clear to Vader. The dark side had promised power, control, immortality, but it had never delivered peace, love, or connection. The very things he had sought to protect had been destroyed by his own hand, twisted by the darkness that had consumed him. The Emperor's laughter echoed through the chamber as he rose from his throne, lightning sparking from his fingertips.
If you will not be turned, you will be destroyed.
Palpatine snarled, directing the full fury of the dark side at Luke. Vader watched as his son writhed in agony, the Emperor's power searing through him. In that instant, the full weight of his actions crashed down on him. Every life he had taken, every betrayal, every moment that had led to this point, he had brought nothing but suffering. The dark side had not freed him. It had enslaved him. But this was different. For the first time in years, Anakin Skywalker emerged from the darkness, a spark of light within the abyss. He couldn't let his son die. Without hesitation, Vader rose to his feet. He could feel the weight of the Emperor's gaze, the pull of the dark side urging him to obey, to submit. But this time, he wouldn't. Summoning the last of his strength, he grabbed Palpatine from behind and lifted him, the dark energy surging through him as the Emperor screamed in shock and fury. The lightning arced across Vader's body, tearing through him, but he didn't stop. He hurled the Emperor into the abyss, the shriek of his former master fading as he fell to his death. Vader collapsed, his body broken, his respirator sputtering as he lay on the floor. Luke rushed to his side, cradling him in his arms.
Father!
Luke whispered, his voice choked with emotion. For the first time in decades, Vader felt at peace. The galaxy bore the scars of his choices. The pain he had caused could never be undone. But in this moment, with his son by his side, he had made the choice to save, not to destroy. He had chosen love over power, and in doing so had found a measure of redemption.
Luke, you were right.
Vader rasped, the voice beneath the mask soft, no longer the cold menace of Darth Vader, but the voice of Anakin Skywalker.
Tell your sister you were right.
With one final breath, he closed his eyes, the weight of the dark side lifting as the light of the Force embraced him. Anakin Skywalker had returned. That's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoy it, and tell us in the comments below about what you think and what you want to see next. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, may the Force be with you.